All right, it's now 6:02, and we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. We have quorum. We'll go ahead and take attendance. I'm present, Neil Camby, trustee Romero,
Present.
trustee Sullivan,
Present.
trustee Dryden. Okay, trustee Nowak is not here yet. Superintendent Ramirez.
Present.
Okay, Ms. Peterson.
Present.
All right, and Ms. Torres. All right, very good. All right, first item is the adoption of the agenda. Can I get a motion for the adoption of the agenda? All right, can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion or changes to the agenda?
One question.
Yes.
Is Ms. Nowak coming? Are we doing something for?
We-
I didn't see it on the
I'm not certain on Mrs. Nowak's attendance, but we do have something for her in celebration of her. It's not on the agenda. It'll be part of my superintendent's report.
Okay. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of adopting the agenda as presented? Aye. Okay, 4-0. All right, next item is public comment on closed session items. Have we received any comments for discussion on closed session items? Okay, receiving none. All right, we are going to adjourn from open session to closed session and try to resume as close as we can to 18:30 or 6:30. Okay, see you guys back here. Okay, everyone, we've adjourned from closed session at 6:45 with no actions taken. And now we're reconvening in public session at 6:50. And we'll go ahead and have the official opening of the meeting. So if we get everyone to stand, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, so the first item on the agenda is for approval of the minutes. Can I get a motion for the approval of the minutes from our regular board meeting on October 18th, 2022? Can I get a second? Okay, any questions or discussion regarding the minutes from our October 18th meeting? Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes as presented? All those in favor? Aye. Okay, all those opposed? What's that? You're abstaining. Okay. Minutes are approved 3-0 with 1 abstinence. All right, so do we have any audience to address the Board of Trustees, comments by the public this evening? Okay, so moving right along, we'll go ahead and go into Dr. Ramirez's superintendent's report.
Okay, good evening, board. Good evening, guests. I actually want to move a little bit out of order here because we do have guests, and I'd like to invite Mr. Klinsky to come up and help introduce our guests and our focus. Just very lightly, at last board meeting, the board wished to have an update on just some of our extended learning and overnight learning opportunities. And so we've got 2 kiddos here and families to talk about their experiences at the recent 7th grade trip to Pali Institute, which is revolves around outdoor education. So I do want to turn it over to Ms. Kuklinski and allow her to take it from here, because she has been working very diligently, as you'll see in the slide deck, with our kiddos.
So we have actually for our 6th grade
I guess I just want to thank you guys so much for coming to this meeting. It is so helpful for us to hear about your experiences, good and bad, but it sounds like there is so much good in this experience. And I also want to give the two of you thumbs up. You are excellent public speakers, and it takes a lot to stand in front of like a group of adults and talk, and you guys did marvelously. I'm so proud of you.
Well, just to thank both Noah and Kylie and Mrs. Ayala and Mrs. Roberson. And while handing out acknowledgements here, none of this is possible without really a lot of hard work behind the scenes, right? And so the ultimate reward is having the kids feel like they got a valuable experience and like they got a lot of learning. And I'm really glad they highlighted the ability to be with one another, especially early in the year. That relationship building, and I'm sorry I misspoke earlier, 6th grade, not 7th to see me, but really the coming together, it's not just amongst themselves, it's really also with the adults. And in this case, I really want to acknowledge Mrs. Davis, Mrs. Cindy Davis, and Mrs. Roberson, who both served as chaperones and more, because just really to make it all come together. Roel Perez, who drove the bus out there, Leticia Cousineau, who drove herself out there as well to support, especially with the ice and snow being a factor. Anyway, a lot of work behind the scenes, and the parents who were so supportive of their time, who came to who followed along with all the things that we were asking to do, and even pivots, and of course their donations, PFO. I mean, the list goes on and on. It really was a community-wide effort, and I'm very fortunate and grateful to all of you to see that this is the kind of feedback that the kids provide and the experiences that they shared in. So, thank you. We're going to move into the superintendent's report, and so part of that was a discussion around learning engagement. You'll see it there. It's actually in a few slides. If you can just go back a few slides. So starting with learning and engagement, as you heard, Pally, I won't make mention of that, just to suffice to say that it was a great experience. We also had, since we last met, a Q1 awards assemblies, really well attended, really exciting. Those are really fulfilling for me, to be able to honor kids in different ways, with different ways of recognizing their effort, their talent, their skills. I also want to highlight that we had a number of students who made honor roll in 6th through 8, 68 students, merit roll, 30 students. Again, great gathering of community, celebrating student success, and again, focusing on the whole child, particularly some of the attributes that they wanted to highlight that will continue to happen over the next several awards assemblies. On the learning engagement side, kind of pivoting a little bit, we still are working through our framework for the future. That is something that the staff has really taken hold of over the last, really since the start of the year, dating back to August, more fully. We are trying to just make sure that we're constantly revisiting how learning happens at Mesa, that we're remaining very committed to being engaging, to being student-centered, and also to help students develop the skills and competencies that they're going to need to succeed. You've heard me say that many times before. I'm hoping to continue to provide the board and the public updates. Moving forward, I just wanted to give you a brief, kind of high-level view of what each grade span is focusing on. And you see it here. Middle school is developing student portfolios. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about some of the data that we're formulating or that is coming from students and their performance thus far. They're in 2nd grade, they're proposing an exhibition of learning. Third through 5th, student-led conferences was something that they really positioned for earlier this year. And they're also moving forward with student portfolios. A lot of the through line is going to be around writing and having students write and become better communicators. That's really something that we're honing in on. And in TK1, they're also focusing on portfolios, but they're also focusing really on those basic and fundamental skills of literacy. So I'm hoping to continue to provide the board updates. I have every intent to bring forward, similar to the way we did last year, a mid-year LCAP review, so that you can see where we are in our progress toward reaching those goals. Similarly, I just wanted to provide just a high-level overview of learning supports. I won't go too much into these because each one of them could be quite an extensive conversation, but I'll just highlight two. One is a common PLC time. What we did was, and what Ms. Kuklinski was instrumental in doing as the principal, is arranging time in such a way that it provided us an opportunity to, or teachers specifically, to meet during the school day and school week. So those meeting patterns fall on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and they're very predictable according to a schedule. And Ms. Kuklinski basically devised the schedule to be able, so that the kids could receive music, PE, and library time during that time. So they're not missing out on those things that they would be receiving anyway. But it is creating opportunities for teachers to meet regularly. And what's coming out of that is incredibly important. Ms. Kuklinski is a part of those, Ms. Wagner is a part of those, Ms. Garza is a part of those, as people who work outside of the classroom. But the point being that it's allowed teachers to be able to communicate about how their students are doing, to set goals together, to look at how they're doing, and to also make plans that they're able to then revisit more frequently. Prior to this, that was all happening in off times, and it's very difficult to do. But now that we're doing it this way, I feel like the conversations have gotten so much more robust, so much sharper, and just continuing to push in a very student-centered way. This dates back to the start of the year, so it's a new thing for us, even though we're having conversations that have gone on for an extended period of time. But I think the level of specificity is what's now driving those conversations. And those agreements amongst teachers are phenomenal. And so we're going to revisit those tomorrow during our staff time. But I just wanted to highlight that particular practice as something new this year that we're really making the most of. In addition to that, I want to also highlight just what's happening with the learning support. And with learning support specifically, our paraprofessionals are being trained on these, on how to be more effective at teaching kids at the level at which they are. Not every student in TK through 1 specifically comes in with the same needs or with the same advantages. So this is really getting down to the student through small groups, through very strategic ways of doing things that we are already seeing the benefits. And the early reports just from this year is that the kids in kindergarten are already surpassing some of the standards that we have for year end. It's very encouraging, very, very encouraging, because we know that literacy is foundational, and especially now to science, to math, it's 100% foundational to better development around those topics as well. So we're really doubling down. Our paraprofessionals, our teachers, our in-class teachers, outside of the classroom teachers, all working in unison, very specific schedules with very targeted supports in mind. So I'm just very excited about that, as you can tell, but it's really not just excitement for the fact that we're doing it, but excitement for the fact that we're seeing results starting to come across from what students can do and produce already at this stage in the year. So more to come on the learning supports, especially as we head into the mid-year LCAP review, where we'll be able to expand on quite a few of these things more fully. Moving forward, health and safety, I just want to continue to reiterate just how important this is. Where this has hit us now, fortunately for us, we're at a place in the post-pandemic world where we are looking at, a different phase of how COVID or just the environment will suit us in the coming months. Of particular concern for me is how it's impacting our attendance. That continues to be a really significant challenge for us, because when kiddos are ill or parents at home are ill, it puts us back in terms of students being able to fully participate. So, I just want to continue to reiterate that we do have COVID testing so that if anybody needs it, we have it available to them as well. And then moving along, facilities. So in a minute, we're going to get into the heart of the agenda, but suffice it to say that our HVAC window replacement project has been going longer than anticipated, but I feel in the last 2 weeks, we've really cleared a lot of important ground. So much so that the end is very, very much in sight, and we're anticipating that we'll be done here in the next coming weeks. Already, the roof is pretty much completed again. Being able to square that, especially in light of rains, is very important. It's been a priority. The systems are operational. We've suffered some setbacks there, but we're in a good place right now, and it's very near to completion. Unfortunately, there have been challenges that have been revealed as conditions have come to light. And so a lot of these buildings had not been tended to in quite some time. And we did discover some things that were unforeseen. We'll talk more about those a little bit later. But in this instance, I just wanted to reiterate that the bulk of what we experienced as additional costs to the district come by way of unforeseen circumstances that could only have been revealed once the contractors got in there and started to do the demolition phase. And once that was revealed, it was really in our best interest to address those issues to ensure the longevity of the modernization efforts that we were undertaking. So we'll have more of an opportunity to discuss that a little later in the agenda, but I just wanted to make just a few points about where we are in the facilities fund. And food services, we've extended that, and Moorpark has been gracious enough to continue to support us through the end of the month. We're hoping to get operational sooner than that, but we have that to fall back on. All right, moving forward, here we are. This is kind of an attendance overview. As you can see, just from the graphic representation there, we are not quite where we need to be quite frank. Our target is 95%. Ordinarily, I put a table here, and I'm sorry I didn't do that with this one. But in this case, we are a shade under 95%, hovering between 93 and 94% across grade spans, with the exception of fifth and sixth that are doing much better. That's encouraging. I wish I could tell you that there's a rhyme or reason to this. I don't know that there is a discernible pattern quite yet, but there is certainly a lot that we're doing to try to balance health with the obvious need to be in class, engaging and learning with teachers and colleagues. And then lastly, I wanted to just talk about upcoming events. It is the holiday season, so we have a lot of celebrations and a lot of coming together, and you see them there. I won't go through each one of them independently, but I will highlight just a few. Winter concert, that is something that is always a highlight, and Ms. Wong is putting together this program. Wonderful development amongst the kids. And so we're expecting that it's going to be a great event. Mesa Cares, that is an ongoing effort that is now years of tradition, where we take food, goods, gifts, and basically give back to our own community. And the 8th grade banquet, one of those many milestones that kids experience in 8th grade, that becomes a really memorable part of them ending their journey on a high note here at Mesa. So with that said, that concludes our superintendent report.
Thank you, Dr. Ramirez. Any questions for Dr. Ramirez?
What is a portfolio? Like what are we having the kids focus on in their portfolio?
So portfolios, those are right now, I just put it there broadly. Portfolio is basically a collection of work, and it's really it can take a couple of different forms. Typically, it means exemplar work that has been, really curated, polished, and is put into kind of a finished product. not every portfolio may look that way. Sometimes it includes revised so that you can see the beginning and the end. Here's where the child or the student started. Here's where they concluded. And the reason we highlighted that is to impress upon students that it is about ongoing effort, that it is about more or less challenging yourself to continue to grow and learn. And writing is an incredible way of just capturing it because the kids are doing it so often, and it provides them an opportunity to see firsthand how much they've grown from a period of the beginning of the year all the way to the end, or within the year from the beginning of maybe the first draft or the first even brainstorming all the way through a finished product. So that's really what this entails. Each grade level is doing it a little differently, but the goal is to be able to showcase learning in a way that parents and families can see it. It's not only for the kids, although it's primarily for the kids so that they themselves can see how much they've grown, but it's also for the families to be able to partake in that and work on or acknowledge that growth, and for the child to be able to present it. That's where the student-led conferences come in, is for the child to be able to, or the student to be able to tell their parents, here's where my learning is, here's what my goals are for the year, and here's where it's going next. So this is something that has been done in ways across the years and in different grade levels with different teachers. But the commitment to it now is, I think, what's setting it apart. There's a real concerted effort to be more consistent across grade levels. And we're still finding our way with exactly defining it for ourselves, because it takes some compromise and adjusting to what a kindergartner can do versus a 4th or 5th grader. I have 2 comments.
I have 2 comments about the portfolios. One is how much student input is there into what goes into the portfolio? Or is there I would hope that there's a section devoted specifically to student input saying, this is my best work, or this is what I want to remember. I know that as my kids came through school here, teachers would help and say, here's your portfolio, you get 5 items. And they, throughout the year, would adjust in and out, and then leave a different section for teachers to say, here's progress from day 1 to day 180. And this is where they started at, this is where we are at the end of the year, and show that real progression where the student, on the other hand, can show off what they have really proud of, and that those are kept on an annual basis. The second comment is that I've heard the term portfolios being used for years and years and years here, but really haven't seen portfolios used. I hear them talked about a lot in these meetings, but I've not had opportunity to see any portfolio, or if the students have access to those portfolios or the parents. And so I don't know if that's the case or not.
Well, we are going to talk about that tomorrow, and that is something that I will discuss with our staff. Ms. Klinsky and I have been talking about how to facilitate that discussion. And part of it is also that we've been really taking the teachers' teams leads and saying, here's where we find ourselves, here's what we want to push, here's what we want to, where we want to collect work, or and it's not all neat and tidy. I wish I could say that, but I think that it is, from my vantage point, a big step in the right direction. And let me work on seeing if we can't produce some way of the board seeing some portfolios out there that really highlight the good work that is being done in classrooms.
Well, I would appreciate that, simply because I'm odd man out. I don't have any children in school anymore. And so you guys may see these things, but all I know is that these portfolios have been talked about since the days of Dr. Puglisi. And I think I saw some things in one grade level, but nothing that's carried on throughout their entire school career, which I've always been led to believe is happening.
And just a note about, I think the medieval banquet is from 10 to 12:30, not 8:30 to 12:30. So for those coming,
I will
and
double check
hopefully
my
coming in
time.
Costume, are you coming?
Double check Mesa Matters and not this report.
Okay.
That
Yeah,
will,
Mr. Di Maria last night said 10.
okay,
I'm gonna go with that.
I will I will amend based on Mr. Di Maria's message.
Okay, any more questions for Dr. Ramirez in regarding the superintendent report or any other requests? All right, moving on, we have board members' reports and communications. We received a correspondence from the Ventura County Office of Education regarding the Golden Valley Charter School unaudited actuals for 2021, 2022. Let's say approved. No other communications, Brianna? Okay, and then board members' reports or communications. Any report from any members from PFO? PTA, okay. All right, and then board members' interest or concerns. Any interest or concerns to express at the meeting this evening?
I was just gonna say, I hope next year we can make the Camarillo Christmas Parade. I know we didn't make it this year. And I deeply think it's important to be a part of the community and, you know, all of our surrounding areas. And so I want to make sure that we try to highlight that, make sure it happens, and potentially make connections with community members, you know, potential farmers, so we can borrow their truck or a tractor and all those kind of things. Because if we plan ahead, it'll make it a lot easier, you know, come next holiday season, because during the holiday season, it is very busy, which is why we need to try to plan ahead as much as we can.
I think that was, we had talked about, Dr. Ramirez and I had talked about that, and I think there was some more discussion went on with that, the logistics that were a little more challenging. So I think moving forward, if we can plan on it for next year.
Yes, that's, I mean, I couldn't agree more. Unfortunately, we weren't able to make it come together this year, but that will be a way to do that moving forward. And for the very reasons you cited, it's being able to do it in a way that was also thoughtful and that encompassed community, and that really put our best foot forward. And speaking for myself, feeling that we couldn't pull it off quite that way, I didn't want to have us have a poor showing, to be very frank. So at this point, that is a plan for the future.
So a lot of schools are in this parade. So whether it's just the school and it has maybe what I was envisioning was different kids in different uniforms for the different sports we offer, or kids maybe in their suits for mock trial, showing and representing our variety of things that we offer here at Mesa, from agriculture to mock trial, and representing that with the students, you know, maybe wearing a Santa hat, maybe not, but at least in that variety, because there are several schools in this parade that are in Pleasant Valley. So I thought it made sense that we could be a part of it. And there's bands. There's also school bands in there. The high school marching bands are in there from all the surrounding cities. And so it's really a fun thing that showcases different schools and bands and music programs. So I thought, why not let people know that we have all those things? Downtown on Las Posas.
Perhaps the way, I understand that we're late in getting to it this year, but as a way of planning, that we send a delegation to the parade this year and see what's there. Sure, she's there, but it shouldn't just be her. There should be a delegation saying that here's what people are doing so that we can match that, and or brainstorm from it. Again, I'm all about having student involvement, and that's what she's talking about, is having students in the parade. But likewise, if they're observing the parade, say, how would you do this different? Just like when I asked these children here, these two students about Pally Institute, what did you like about it? Would you go again? What didn't you like about it? How do we make it better? It's got to, you know, they become far more involved when they have ownership in the program.
Perhaps maybe we could put this out to, you know, we've got student government, see if they're involved, if they want to be interested in that, maybe something they can kind of help plan with a staff
I will
advisor.
sponsor for like hot chocolate for any student council members that are in the
Okay.
student council. If they want to go with me, you can put that out there.
Okay, sounds like we've got some ideas for next year. Okay, so we'll make sure we keep on top of that one. All right, so moving along, we have the consent agenda. Can I get a motion for approval of the consent agenda as presented?
I move to accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second?
I will second.
Okay, we have a second.
Dr. Kemi, I
Yes.
wanted to just make one clarification.
Yes.
On the enrollment,
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. we
the
did.
figures on the first page are actually accurate,
Okay,
but it's the second page that we'll have to revisit.
okay,
They're off by 1 in grades 7 and 8. Yes. Mhm.
okay.
So, but the enrollment cited
Actual
in
numbers.
page 1 is correct.
All right. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, all those approving the consent agenda as presented? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, 4-0. All those opposed? None? Okay, all right. So moving on, we now have a public hearing. We have 3 public hearings we have to hold tonight. So the first one, the first public hearing is for AB 1200, disclosure of the collective bargaining agreement with Macy Union Teachers Association, MUDA, and Macy Union Support Team Must. Disclosures, consideration, and public comment regarding the proposed collective bargaining agreements with the Macy Union Teachers Association for the period of July 1st, 2020 through June 30, 2023. And so we're going to open a public session for this at 7:30 for any public comment. Okay. Okay, hearing no public comment, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing at 7:31. All right, so the next public hearing is public hearing for the tentative collective bargaining agreement with Macy Union Teachers Association, MUDA. Okay, we'll go ahead and open that public session at 7:31. Okay, we have no public comments or no comments on the public hearing for the tentative collective bargaining agreement with Macy Union Teachers Association. We're going to close that at 7:32. And then the third public hearing is public hearing for the tentative collective bargaining agreement with the Macy Union Support Team, Must. So we'll go ahead and open that public session at 7:32 for any public comment. Okay, having no public comment from the hearing, we'll go ahead and close the hearing for the tentative collective bargaining agreement with Macy Union Support Team Must at 7:33. Okay, so moving on to our action discussion items. First up on 12A, following behind these public hearings are now the consideration of the approval for the disclosure of the collective bargaining agreement with Macy Union Teachers Association, MUDA, and Macy Union Support Team Must in accordance with AB 1200, AB 27546 for the period of July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2023. So can I get a motion for the approval?
I so move.
I'll
Right.
second the motion.
And a second? Okay, Dr. Ramirez?
Dr. Kami, I just wanted to make a comment, as our teachers and classified staff, hear this, but it's important for me to make note that it was a really productive negotiation or round of negotiations. And as I've mentioned to the board, I'll mention here that it was not only productive, but really aligned to common goals, common values, and common purpose. And we were able to move pretty quickly and in a very effective way, and with a good partnership. So I'm thankful to Ms. Peterson, for her contributions. Thankful, obviously, to the board for the support and the confidence. And of course, very grateful to be, reach an agreement with our staff.
That's great to hear. So collaborative agreements there. So any further question or discussions regarding this? Okay, all those in favor for the approval of the disclosure of the collective bargaining agreement with Mesa Union Teachers Association and the Mesa Union Support Team in accordance with AB 1200 and AB 27546 for the period of July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2023. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? None. That's approved 4-0. Okay, the next item, again, following along with our negotiation discussions, is consideration of the approval of the tentative bargaining agreement with Mesa Union School District and the Mesa Union Teachers Association MUTA for the period of July 1st, 2022 through June 30, 2023. Can I get a motion for approval? Okay. Okay.
I'll second the motion.
Second, any questions or discussion regarding the approval of the agreement with Mesa Union and MUTA for the July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2023 agreement? Dr. Mears, any comment or just move on this one? Okay. All right. So no further discussion. All those in favor of approving the tentative bargaining agreement with the Mesa Union School District and Mesa Union Teachers Association for the period of July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2023. All those in favor? Aye. Okay. All those opposed? None. All right. Next item. All right. Again, is the consideration of the approval of the tentative bargaining agreement with Mesa Union School District and the Mesa Union Support Team must for, again, the same period, July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2023. Can I get a motion for approval? I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any questions or discussion? Okay. All those in favor for the approval of the tentative bargaining agreement with Mesa Union School District and Mesa Union Support Team for the period of July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2023. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, all those opposed? None. Okay. All right, so moving along here, now we have a consideration for the approval of the proposed changes to the orders for the Monet Construction Incorporated. I'll get a motion for approval to the change orders. Can I have a second? Okay, trustee Dryden second. Okay, there are 38 individual change orders under this one action item. Any of those open to discussion or have any questions or discussion on any of these change orders?
Yes, so I really want to focus our attention. The board has been receiving just some updates on where we've been in terms of this particular project. Very important project. We all know that, and one that was always operating on a very, very short timetable. That bears repeating. But the way I really want to focus our energy on the document here in the screen, which is the first item listed, that enumerates and provides just a brief description of the actual project or the part of the scope of that particular project in each one of these change orders. So you see the way the columns are written out. I want to highlight two things. One is that there was an original allocation and allowance in the contract that the board approved originally, dating back to last year, and that was for 150,000. Okay. Beyond that, you'll see down below in the table, you'll see that we have exhausted that in effect and moved beyond that to the cost associated there, which is the 319,306 figure. Okay. So I bring that to the attention of the board because it is in excess of what the board originally approved, and it is those are funds that are coming from our Measure O bond. I just want to make 2 points on this. One is bring the board's attention and the public's attention really to that last column. The vast majority of these were due to unforeseen circumstances I mentioned before. These were items that when demolition occurred or after the fact when construction began, these were things that were not included in the original contract that required a separate cost. And down to the individual item, each one of these was vetted, discussed either with the architects, with the engineers, or with myself included, each one of them with myself included. Ms. Peterson and Mr. De Leon, Orlando De Leon, who is the director of MOT for BSA, has been point person on this project throughout, on site throughout the summer, weekends, just poring over the details of this particular project. We were thrown a significant curveball by DSA, and that's incurred, and that was a cost incurred in item 41. That was by far one of the largest costs, and that was because of a ruling from the field engineer involved representing DSA. And that was unforeseen. It was something where we had already moved forward with construction a certain way, and there was a ruling that took us backwards. And unfortunately, that is what has also created many of the delays that we've experienced over the last 2 months, especially. So I wish that were different, but we made a calculated decision that it was not in our own best interest to further delay the project at the risk of being basically overruled, if you will, on any subsequent appeals. So with that said, that was completely unforeseen and something that set us back significantly. Every other expenditure there, in my opinion, is very justifiable based on not just the project, but the overall integrity of the project moving forward. So with that said, Ms. Peterson is here to address some of these comments if the board wishes, but I leave it for questions or comments from the board. We're looking at completing here in the month of December, inside of the next 2 to 3 weeks.
The scaffolding.
Yes, right now, well, the scaffolding itself is gone. What it is a construction zone, so it's still roped off, but the front of the building has been completed. It just requires now last few touches and paint. But those projects were completed last week over the break. As they were here, work crews were here over the holiday break, just trying to gain back some time, if you will.
So Tamara, the initial budget overage was, how much was that? Like a 3% over that we allowed? Yeah, and I didn't mean that. I mean, I meant that as, to keep that minimal percentage down there in a large construction project, and especially in a remodel, that's a relatively small amount considering the amount of work that was done. And I did a tour with Dr. Ramirez, and showed me some of the walls that were opened up and hadn't, we're behind a planter, and we're absorbing moisture from a planter that had been there for, I don't know, 50 years or so, or even longer there. Yeah. Yeah, and understand, why we have it there. It's better to do it now than to not do it. So I think it's all reasonable and appropriate. Understood.
I have a question or two about this, and it had to do with budgeting and planning. We've gone through a lot, and these are old buildings, with the exception of this building that we're in. And we say that they're unforeseen, but in some cases, I think they should have been foreseen. That something's been in place since 1939, that there should have been some expectations that things are not quite up to code. You brought out the one that talked about the sheeting. I'm looking at others is the roof replacement. And when knowing what we were going to do with regards to AC units and putting things on the roof and that sort of thing, I'm looking to say, how do we prevent such things in the future? This is what it is. We had monies to cover that, and that's fine. But how do we mitigate this going forward? Saying these are old buildings, and we're going to encounter these things in the future, and how do we plan for that? Is 10% going to be sufficient to hold back, or is that something that we need to be requiring of our contractors making bids, that they need to come in with a better estimate up front, knowing that these are old buildings? It's no surprise to anybody.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Sullivan, to your point, I understand the board's position as stewards, right, of the public's interests and funds. So I completely agree with that. The idea of how to be able to foresee that these are going to be issues that we'll encounter. I don't want to, maybe I misspoke and misrepresented as if there was no acknowledgement on our part that these were buildings that hadn't been renovated in decades and so on. I think we knew that, but to Ms. Peterson's point, the extent to which it happened, the extent to which some things that were even below the lines of the windows that would be replaced, right? Peeling back something on a planter that had been installed decades ago. that part we couldn't have seen. And you're right, the code has changed, and now we can't be retroactive about looking at codes as they were, but rather bringing it to code as it is now into the future. And I too echo Ms. Peterson's point broadly that in the grand scheme of things, as challenging as it has been, delays we've encountered, that on the whole, we actually came up with a very favorable contract as a whole, even with the change orders, because the total cost, I think, still falls in many ways right under what many of the other bids were coming in. If you recall, the bids ranged all the way up to 5 million. And, imagining that we would have opened up walls, you can surely bet that contractors would then operate on a worst case scenario rather than, being more tempered. So, I mentioned that not because it's not to assuage your concerns. I understand them, but it's rather to respond and say we were doing our best effort at the time, while also trying to make sure that we got an early bid proposal. That was really the biggest turning point. And we were just like DSA, I'll be very candid, just like DSA did it to us this time, they actually helped us out initially because that project got out of DSA a month sooner than we expected, which allowed us to put it out to bid at an even better time than we had anticipated. So I wish I had different, answer for you now, but in hindsight, I don't know that we could have done much differently, in my honest opinion.
We all wish we had that crystal ball,
I appreciate all of this, and please understand that I appreciate the discussion that we're having. But we as trustees have that obligation to say, what have we learned from things? Rather than just passively sit here and say, let's rubber stamp and move on to the next one, and then to the next one without ever reevaluating the things that we've done. And so we need to be in a constant state of reevaluation of processes. Could we have made the process better or not? If the process was great, fine. We obviously had a great advantage by going to bid early, and we beat a lot of things by, supply chain and inflation and all that all came into our favor by doing what we did when we did. Had we gone 6 months later, it had been a whole different story. We always typically take the lowest bid, but are they all bidding the same thing? Yeah, we're required to do that. And so, but are they all bidding the same thing? Did another contractor say, well, I foresaw these things? Yeah. That's their bidding period. So, okay.
I think all in all, we're getting a good value and getting a good job done. And again, with looking at, other cost overruns, other places and the time, the delays, other places that happen, we're doing really well there. So I think we're in good stead there. So any other questions or any other discussion? Okay, so we need to approve these change orders. So can I get, we've already had a motion. So all those in favor for the consideration of the proposal change orders for Monet Construction 1 through 38. Can I get a motion for approval? All right, I can't get a vote. All those in favor, yeah. Is it, or is listed? Are there 43 or 38?
I move to approve the proposed change order for Monet Construction as presented and for items 1 through 8, which are a variety of change orders, is not all except that as listed on the agenda.
I'm sorry, that was your motion? Or well, I'm sorry, you
I
voted, you moved,
Yeah.
okay,
To accept those.
okay.
The motion voted.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, so motion's approved 4-0. Okay, so next item is the consideration for the memorandum of understanding for the provision of special educational mental health services with Ventura County Behavioral Health. Can I get a motion for the approval?
I move that we approve the MOU for special ed services, special education, mental health services with Ventura County Behavioral Health.
Second motion.
And second, okay, any questions or discussion regarding the MOU? Okay,
Is it, 2 questions, is this a renewal or brand new?
This is a brand new MOU, and as the board received in the background, this would be part of our SELPA, Special Education Local Plan agency, and it's countywide, only for really the most acute mental health scenarios among students served. And as I mentioned to, as I wrote to the board, currently we have no students in need of this level of support.
okay. Any other questions or discussion? Okay, all those in favor of approving the MOU with for the provision of special education mental health services with the Ventura County Behavioral Health, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, 4-0. All right, next item is the consideration approval of the 4th grade field trip to Mission San Fernando del Reyes, España on December 5th, 2022. All those in favor, or can I get a motion for the approval of that field trip?
I so move.
Okay,
Make a motion to approve.
get a second? Okay, any questions or discussion?
Do we know why they switched missions?
I don't know that, but I know that yes, they did switch missions. So I don't know that.
Okay. All right, so all those in favor for the approval of the 4th grade field trip to Mission San Fernando del Reyes, España on December 5th, 2022, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, all those opposed? Okay. All right, next up is the consideration for the adoption of the June 2022 board policy revisions for the following sections. BP 3551, I think this is one we had earlier that we brought back, correct? Can I get a motion for the adoption of that board policy revision?
I move that we approve BP, what was that, 3551?
Okay, can I get a second?
I will second with
Okay, so second, and then comments and discussion.
So I was wondering if Tammy, what she is suggesting as far as option 1 or option 2 of this? Because option 1 is wages, salaries, benefits for food service workers would come from the general fund. And option 2 is that wages, salaries, benefits would come from the cafeteria fund. So you are recommending that we choose option 2?
I move that we amend the motion to include option 2.
I will second is,
I will second his.
okay. So we have to approve the amendment. Okay, all those in favor of adopting the amendment to accept option 2 to the above board policy. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. So
Isn't
the
there
amendment,
another
There
option
is
that
a-
won't make a motion?
yeah.
Yeah, this was it. Mhm, this was it. It was a set aside and we didn't include it into the other revisions. You know what? I'm sorry if, yeah, I'm sorry if it was. I'm sorry if it was, but option 2 is the correct option, the cafeteria fund, which is how we're funding, how we currently fund food service workers.
Okay, so we've approved the amendment. Now we have to approve the initial adoption. So all those in favor for the adoption of the June 22 board policy BP 3551 with the amendment as already approved. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, all those opposed? And okay, 4-0 with the amendment. All right, so now we have the consideration of the adoption for the September 2022 board policy revisions for the sections listed below. I get a motion for the approval of the adoption of the 2022 board policy revisions as listed below.
I move to adopt the board policies as presented or amended.
Okay, can you get a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, second.
Now discussion.
Okay, discussion. Jamie?
I'll start with the ones that have options. There's one for the 6164.2, which is the guidance and counseling services. There's options for us to either let colleges and employers and military access our students for these counseling sessions, or option 2 is to not provide access. And it does, even though this is referring to high school kids, it does say this begins in grade 8 in this board policy. So I wanted to understand your recommendations on if we're allowing access currently and if we'd like to continue or discontinue that in the future.
Currently, we are not allowing, let me frame this. Currently, we're not engaging in active recruitment, particularly of, well, really of any armed force, any division of the armed forces, the way that it might at the high school level, in particular, which I think feels like maybe the question. But implicit in some of the onboarding or orientations that we receive from high schools, or that students may receive from high schools on site, or when they come to visit us in the spring, there is reference to and mention of clubs and activities that allude to, you know, different pathways. So that's not a current practice, but it is not something that I would advise the board against. That makes sense? Correct. And let me, part of the reason that I wanted to highlight this in my summaries is because, you know, there are other districts that have a different cultural feeling about active recruitment of students on site, regardless of the activity, right? And here, it's really up to its prerogative to decide. To your point, though, Mr. Sullivan, it does not mandate. It simply allows myself as a district representative to be able to engage in those practices, if it's written in board policy that we can.
Well, and I really believe this board policy already existed, but that it was being amended to include the military. So it already included things like college campuses being able to recruit or sending students, but it was adding the fact that military should be seen like a university or a college, and therefore equally offered that information. That
As
was
an
my
option.
read.
I would agree with the interpretation of it. That's how I read it, that it was amended to include military or divisions of the military.
That may also include JROTC and ROTC.
That's typically how it manifests. It's JROTC or ROTC programs that would come and actively, in theory, come and actively either recruit or be part of broader recruitment efforts to demonstrate to students what pathways they might opt for, as they progress through secondary.
So option 1 is to allow that, option 2 is to not, allow that, correct? And again, as we've said, this is not mandating, but this is just allowing Dr. Ramirez to allow that if it were to come to fruition.
That we're allowed.
Okay.
Another option that we need to decide on is for our board bylaws, the 9100 organization. Option 1 is that you can't serve the same office consecutively, so you have to rotate. And option 2, which is our current practice, is that every year you just reorganize the board and you let people take whatever position they want. It doesn't matter if they've served on that term before. There is an option if we wanted to put a term limit on there, but it is not required. And so my thought was to continue with what our current practices were to stick with option 2 and not to put on the term limit, is what I was thinking.
Agreed. Okay. Any others?
So there's another one, the AR 4118, which has 2 options. This is the one about dismissal, suspension, and disciplinary actions. And the way that they pose that is that if you have an ADA of more than 250, you should be choosing option 1. And if your ADA is less than 250, you should choose option 2. So it's suggested, it's recommended. And so I would think we're going to go in line with what's being recommended to go with option 1 for 4118 option.
Any others?
The only other one I saw that had an option was one that's not discussed at all in this packet. I'm not sure if that was intentional or not, 3515.3, which is District Police and Security Department. But this is one last month I had asked, do we need to accept this at all if it's not applicable to us, or can we not accept it?
So you do need to accept it, and I am comfortable if the board would like to table this, just in light of questions being surfaced. Because although it's not currently our practice, in theory, going back to Mr. Sullivan's point earlier, we could employ, hypothetically, either directly with law enforcement or another security company that would then be contracted here. And the question, if I'm not mistaken, has to do with carrying of weapons on site. Am I correct?
Correct.
So if the board wishes, you can table this and give it a chance to think it over, similarly to the way we did that, because I suspect there might be differing opinions. And I'm okay with that, as long as you're okay with that. I would only say that the board policy does have to be updated because of just wanting to stay current. Otherwise, it defaults to the current language of the board policy, right? And again, hypotheticals around, that's not something that Mesa is even financially able to do. But I bring it here because that is the board's prerogative to either decide to table this and leave it, in which case it defaults to being left as currently constructed, to table it for a future meeting after you've had more of a chance to, just discuss with your own self about what that could look like, or take action now.
But see, that's the question. There's two options in this, because there's the option one for like security and option two for police. And then in the police section, there's another one, option one for firearms, option two for no firearms. And so first you have to decide what kind of security may be applicable for our campus. And then after that, whether or not we would like those security agents or police officers to be allowed to carry firearms on site. So I feel I'm not ready to make a decision on this policy tonight, but I am not in favor of firearms on the campus.
We don't have to make his choice tonight. I'm just going to throw out some hypotheticals here. The reality is that we are probably, what has been the response time from Ventura County Sheriff's Office to get here?
They are making no commitments around being able to get here in a given time period.
So we put measures in place, planning on things we don't want to discuss. But the reality of it is that we are significant amount of time away from any sort of response should we have a need for it. And I'm not saying that we're going to have a need, but this is the way I look at things. It's like when we have arrows in the quiver, it gives us options. When we're nothing there, we have no option as we second guess things. I look at all the situations and we cannot stop people, no matter what we think that we can, but we may deter it. And sometimes just the knowledge of, like having that, I've got a security cam, I got a Ring doorbell, is sufficient to stop people from doing things. And quite obviously, we've seen lots of these videos from Ring doorbells that it doesn't stop anybody, from taking packages off your porch. But it certainly it's a tool that you can use. I'm not committed one way or the other, but I also look at our proximity to the rest of society and how long would it take to get a response here in case of an emergency. And if first that we have to have the funds and allocate the funds up front, that we're going to have some sort of some sort of response, armed or not, on campus. And we're going to have a discussion long before that ever happens. But updating the board policy to that end says that we can discuss it versus not discuss it.
Can I make a proposal to the board and see how you all feel about it? Let me do a little bit more digging on that particular board policy specifically. Because if I heard Dr. Camby correctly, the idea is that there's a possibility of bringing it current without making a decision about option 1 or 2. And then if the decision is for option 2, not making a decision about option 1 or 2, right? So, because there's other factors that start to come into this conversation. And inherent in that is the individual trustees' belief system around whether there should be firearms on campus, which I think is embedded into this board policy. And right now the question is, does the board need to make a decision about those options based on the fact that it is purely hypothetical in the foreseeable future? We don't envision, I can tell you, I do not envision a time where there will be an armed officer here contracted by the district. It's just not feasible cost-wise. But I understand the overall point. So I am proposing to the board that we table this one similarly to the way that which we tabled the other, and that perhaps the board can take action in December or at a future date once I've done a little bit more research on that specific point.
Well, I mean, well, I don't think we have to choose a specific policy. This is a board policy that updates the policy that will guide us in the future if we need it. And then during those different ones, we can either choose option A or option B. This is just a policy. This is just a broad reaching policy. So I don't know if we necessarily have to make any of those choices. I mean, I would feel comfortable accepting it as it is, saying this is going to be our guidance. If in the ever future we ever decide to do anything like that, this is the policy that we would refer to as our guidance. But there's no other further discussion. I mean, so I don't know if we have to pull it out and bring it back for another discussion. Just say, okay, well, we'll accept this policy as an update, and but it's kind of a moot point because we don't think we'll ever go there. But that's the policy, the updated policy that would ever guide us if we decided to.
I agree with
I just see that it presents 2 options.
And at that time, when we have that, if we ever decide to do that, we have 2 options. And then we have to decide at that time which one of those options, if we were to go further. This just gives us the 2 different options. This just gives us 2 options to choose from.
And I think I need clarification because a lot of these have multiple options, but we have to choose an option. Option 1 or option 2.
Right.
This has option 1, option 2. Do I have to choose one? Do I get to choose 2? Can I put them both in the plan? I don't know.
See, I understand what you're saying. I fully comprehend what you're saying. I don't think that we need to be in a rush. I don't think we need to be in a rush.
Because we
Okay.
don't have a plan.
And I've got no problems with tabling these 2 items, just like we did 3551, and saying, Dr. Ramirez, here's some direction. Would you please verify, is it, as Dr. Canby is saying, that we can go forward, just this is updating the policy, and at a future point in time, we're going to choose option 1 or option 2, and or both. That's an option. Or do we need to make that option choice now? And are we prepared to make an option choice now? And I don't see a harm in saying, could you research that piece of it? And is that what you were suggesting?
Yes.
And in light of that, I would move that we table BP 35. Yeah, I was going to do that. BP 3515.3 and AR 3515.3, so that you can research those things, and we'll vote on them at the next meeting, or whenever at a future time.
Okay.
That work?
I'll second
Yeah, okay. So,
No, it was,
We-
a table is
we
an
have-
immediate vote. There is no second. A table is an immediate thing.
okay, I was gonna
Wrong
make, I was
rule.
gonna, because we had the motion with the amendments, which we
Yeah, I
could
think-
amend to table
As
that one.
amended or approved.
Yeah.
And so when it's couched that way, presented that way, then we have some latitude.
Yeah.
Of not having to vote on the individual amendments, but if you want to do that, that's fine.
Okay, so all those in favor of approving the September 2022 board policy revisions as the following sections with BP 3515-3 and AR 351-3 tabled
And what two, and the three that were
and
amended.
AR 4118,
Option
AR option 1, and BP 6164-2, option 1, and board bylaw 9100, organization option 2 with no term limits.
Correct.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, approved 4-0. Okay. Next item is following personnel. We have the consideration of the hiring of the following classified staff. Galilee Ramirez, after-school activities leader effective November 11th, 2022. And Liz Wong, after-school activities leader effective November 28th, 2022. Get a motion for the approval for their hiring.
I move to hire following classified staff, Galilee Ramirez and Liz Wong for the after-school activities leader position.
I second the motion.
Any discussion, questions? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor for the hiring of Galilee Ramirez and Liz Wong for the after-school activity leaders as noted. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, none. Okay, so that the last one is the consideration of the resignation of the following classified staff. Garrett Smith, Computer Resource Center Tech, effective December 5th, 2022. Get a motion for the approval.
I move to accept the resignation of Mr. Garrett.
Okay, can I get a
motion?
second? Okay, all those in favor for any discussion or questions? Okay, all those in favor for accepting the resignation of Garrett Smith, the Computer Resource Center Tech, effective December 2nd, 2022. All those in favor? All right, all those opposed? Okay, 4-0. All right, so future consideration items here. We have the first interim report, which will be December. Okay, and we also have our annual reorganization also at our next meeting, which is December 13th, which is scheduled at 6 p.m.
Can I ask that
Yes.
I can only be in one place at a
Yeah,
time, so-
December 14th.
And I'm not gonna be here on December 15th. I was hoping if possible, if you could push it to the following Tuesday, which would be December 20th.
That would be illegal.
Yeah,
It
so I,
has to be before the 15th.
It has to be before 24th.
so you're correct, actually. It has to be before the 23rd. I did get guidance on this. So it does have to be, you're correct on that, but here's the issue. The issue is that our first interim does need to be approved before December 15th.
Although I can submit it to the county and then just have a signature page later, if that is the pleasure of the board.
That is the pleasure of the board then, because that was one thing, but Mrs. Romero, as usual, does her homework. And she is correct in indicating, and I have it here, organizational meeting must be between December 9th and the 23rd. And per Ed Code 10554, newly elected board members take office on the second Friday in December following certification of election, December 9th, 2022.
So if it's possible, if not.
Well, what about your other option? You said that
Right, so there
Day
is
of the
a-
week
as
is
long
the
as you allowing board members to join remotely if there's a quorum present.
There is a new legislation that came out. If the majority of board members are physically present, then others, if they have the cost to appear via Zoom or via telephone, you can do that.
But you can only exercise that option a limited number.
I'm gonna use that. Sorry. Otherwise, you know, I wouldn't.
So if the board is, we surrender the pleasure of the board. So if the board wishes to conduct it this way, however, Mrs. Romero would have to be sworn into office remotely. Mhm. Because you cannot take action. You cannot take action until you have been sworn in. So why don't we consider the possibility that Mrs. Romero Zoom in? That may be the cleanest option. So if the board is interested in moving in that direction, and that of course would then also include Ms. Huff, who is with us in attendance and would be at that point seated. So I think her input would be the very least has to be acknowledged here, assuming your timeline. Okay. So if the board is so inclined,
What's the requirement if she zooms in? When does she have to take, be sworn in? Let me ask you.
she simply has to take the oath of office before taking any action.
Right.
So if this is, which is why we do the oath of office at the front end of the meeting.
I understand. that,
Right.
But, when you listen. Oh,
And on the 13th, I
Does
should
he
just.
have to be physically present to be?
That's
No.
part of the board. I hope.
Does it have to be
Because it
physically
has to be,
present,
it
or
has
can
to
it
be,
done?
so I'd have to look into this because I think you're asking some technical questions that I don't feel confident answering. I do know that my guidance is that it's very typical that the date of organizational meeting and the oath of office happens on the same day. That's the typical practice. It is not a requirement, so it's not a requirement. Yeah, yes, I've seen oaths of office be taken as standalone events, so
Right.
I have seen that as a practice, and that's up to the pleasure of the board to determine whether that's what you wish to do. Again, I would add that for the sake of simplicity, that can be done remotely, but I also respect your wishes for that to be done perhaps in person, you know, with attendance and so on from others. So,
For the 22nd.
so the 20th, sorry, I'll double check on the calendar. The 20,
It's the third Tuesday. It's your traditional.
the 20th is our traditional pattern, the third Tuesday of the month. We moved it forward for a couple of different reasons, including the being lawful and because of the compliance around the first interim.
I can submit the report. I just, will submit the signature.
So,
It just has to be at the county by the December 15th.
correct. So,
We never make changes to that before they.
I am actually out of town the 16th through the 21st.
okay,
So that's
so
I'm
I
gone
think we,
Thursday
Well,
through,
The 12th a viable option?
You know, I think it's appear via Zoom. But the 12th works for me too.
the 12th is a Monday. While you're checking your schedule, maybe the board might want to consider this as well, because I haven't gotten confirmation from all board members. There was the thought of a special board workshop January, that would be the 14th, January 14th. That is a Saturday. That's when we've typically held them. That would be the 14th. So Ms. Hub, if you are open to that, the idea would be that we would establish a set aside time to be able to talk and basically reconvene as a new board. So if you're okay with that, I've gotten confirmation from 2 trustees already, but wondering if Mr. Sullivan and Mrs. Dryden can make that date available as well.
Well, 14, that's, I can think of the, but what I'm looking at is,
And this would be similar to like, 4 to 6 hour day.
We did 2 hours. Yeah, 8 to, well, it was scheduled from 8 to 10, but realistically, it went beyond that.
but
So
I
the
wanna
morning
go
of.
back to having our officers sworn and reorganizing finally. And are you proposing that we do it on 14?
No, I'm sorry. I just wanted the board to consider that other date. I still believe that based on what I'm hearing just anecdotally from individual trustees, that it might be in the best interest of the board to keep the 13 and authorize the use of the remote option for Mrs. Romero so that she can fully participate and be sworn in at that time. I think that could still wind up being, scheduling wise, at this short a time period, the best bet.
So, both, when is your term?
December,
When is it technically?
that's a good question. I don't know. You're saying by what timeline then?
Okay. She
Her
has-
initial term, she'd still be sworn in until 15 days after that second Friday. So technically, she'd still be sworn in, so if she wasn't.
That takes you to the 24th.
Pardon me? That-
So you're saying swearing in
She-
until
she-
January.
She can still function as a trustee via Zoom. That's
Yeah,
right.
and if you wanted to have a swearing or a oath of office happen in January as a standalone, that I suppose could still be an option.
Yeah.
I already had it last.
Yeah, it was last year.
Take place at the end of that
Right.
meeting, so that the current seated board can take action. I mean, it's just the pleasure of the board.
Okay, where I'm coming from, in my position is to just make sure that all the i's are dotted and t's are crossed, that we're following the law.
Right.
As far as time is concerned, that we don't blow a statute. That's all I care about.
Yeah.
So if you can, and you were saying that she can't function if she's not a sworn officer, but she still would be until the 24th.
Yes,
And she just has to be sworn before the 24th. Really, to take action.
correct. But
And it could be at the beginning.
if
of
that's the,
Subsequent meeting.
that's right, it would be the January and not even the 14th, because the 14th is only a special board meeting.
Does that have to be a regular
But we could
schedule
do it then
before?
anyway.
We could do it then anyway.
Yeah.
Correct.
Because every candidate, when they fill out their papers, is sworn too. Right?
So if the board is comfortable with this, then we table Mrs. Romero's oath of office until January, knowing that she can still take action and as a seated board member through the date of the 13th, and then allow her to work to zoom in on that particular day, knowing that quorum will be met in person. And does that satisfy?
Well, it
Interest.
satisfies us, but I want you to verify it and make sure that we're legal.
No, I think we are.
I think we are too,
Some research.
but I would like that research done.
How about the notes in your- in front of you, right?
I did my research too, Mrs. Romero. No, this was guidance that was provided from the county office because everybody's going through, board seating. So I will confirm, but I believe that we are in good stead with the arrangement that we've just described. Okay, so that would allow us to keep the 13th and still have Mrs. Romero participate and still give her her moment to be sworn into office for a new term. Is that fair? Okay. And lastly, the 14th, I'm going to go ahead and, hearing no objections, just confirm that the 14th of January is a date that we can do our governance workshop. And as I've mentioned to you with Dr. Condon, Dr. Camby proposed that, and I think that's something that I'd like to move forward with just to better prepare. Okay. Yes, and Ms. Hupp would be sworn in on that as well.
On which day?
On the 13th. I'm sorry, December 13th. December 13th. Yes.
You want that now?
I will do my best to confirm that. All right.